right, as we enter bioenergetics, the key word here is going to be energy. If there's one thing to understand is how is energy transformed along the way to be used. We have to make usable energy. Now, what is energy? It is the ability to do work. Now, a big word that we have within biology is autotrophs. An example of your autotrophs are going to be your plants. The importance of your autotroph is they can harness the sun's energy to make sugar. And the sugar is going to be important for themselves, as well as your heterotrophs, which are going to be your consumers, your decomposers. So they are basically the key to any food chain or food web, because they can make sugar. And when they do this, this is through the process of photosynthesis. And then when different organisms process the sugar, that is through the process of cellular respiration. So your autotrophs have the ability to harness radiant energy from the sun and make it into something useful. And that useful thing is needed for all of life to process in their metabolic reactions. Now, energy cannot be destroyed. There is a law called the law of conservation of energy. This basically says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Essentially, it transforms. It takes on a different form. So, for instance, for us to move, we have to harness chemical energy in the form of ATP, and we can process that through what's called mechanical energy. We can move different body parts. Now, plants have the ability to use photosynthesis to harness into chemical energy in the form of bonds within the sugar that they'll process down to ATP. Another big example is 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island is a nuclear reactor. So we have a nuclear reaction which causes a lot of heat as well as a lot of light. That heat heats up water. Water becomes steam. Steam is going to power a generator. Steam is going to power a turbine. The turbine is connected to a generator which creates electricity. You're also going to have sound in there as well. So the key thing with a nuclear reactor is we are taking nuclear energy, and eventually we want our large output to be electrical energy, electricity. Now, all organisms require energy. It is a necessity because you need energy for metabolism. Metabolism are all of the chemical reactions that keep an organism alive. How do they get there? Well, just as we just kind of introduced, we have our autotrophs. They are going to make sugar. A big example of the process is photosynthesis. This is not the only example that autotrophs use. You do have some organisms that live in the bottom of the ocean that use what's called chemosynthesis, the chemicals from deep sea vents, in order to kind of do a similar process. And then you also have your heterotrophs. Your heterotrophs are going to be the ones that have to consume other things to transform it into ATP. So when we talk about the food chain, food web, your autotrophs are going to be the bottom. They are going to be the most important part. They set the stage. Now, a key thing to remember is your autotrophs, if we're talking about plants, are going to go through photosynthesis, and they're also going to go through cellular respiration. They go through the entire cycle. Build up the sugar, break it down. Heterotrophs only go through the respiration part. We do not have chloroplasts, so we rely on consuming food, consuming plants, or consuming animals that may have eaten plants, because we need to essentially steal sugar, because we cannot make it. Because your autotrophs are making sugar. The biggest form of energy is what's called ATP. In order for a cell to maintain all of its chemical reactions, all of its work, whether it is movement, whether it is transporting, much like we saw in the cell membrane, enzymes helping out with, remember, hydrolysis or dehydration synthesis, that all requires ATP. Adenosine triphosphate. We also have something called ADP. Notice it starts with a D, because that D stands for di, which di means two. So diphosphate. So notice how we only have two phosphates, where we have three phosphates here. Think of this as if you are shooting a Nerf gun. There are Nerf gun kind of blasters out there where you put different balls in the chamber and you kind of push a spring back. The more force that you kind of push the spring back, the faster it's going to come out, more energy is coming out. Same general idea here. Three phosphates is going to create much more energy than two. It's that third phosphate. This is kind of the moneymaker right there, that third phosphate. Breaking that bond creates a lot more energy, releases a lot more energy. I don't want to use that word create because energy is not created. Releases a lot more energy than simply processing ADP. So ATP, 3 phosphates, ADP, 2 phosphates. Higher energy form is having 3. You're getting more bang for your buck by processing ATP. So in terms of our ATP cycle, essentially what happens is we are breaking this down. Whenever we do that, it becomes ADP because we only have 2 phosphates. Whenever you break bonds, you release energy. Whenever you build bonds, it costs energy. So we have a cycle here. We want to break down ATP, and then we want to build it back up from ADP to ATP. So this is the moneymaker. So process it. It's then going to become ADP. We're going to add a lone phosphate to make it ATP again. So essentially, ATP minus a phosphate equals ADP plus energy. We go to the other side where we want to build bonds. We have ADP plus a phosphate plus energy, and that is going to equal ATP. So you're building up those bonds, and that energy is stored in the bonds. Then we want to kind of break it out. So cost energy to release energy. So it's more cost efficient to build up ADP because you end up getting more energy out when you have 3 phosphates versus 2. Once again, our metabolism, all of the chemical reactions in an organism. This is not simply just digestion. You'll hear it about digestion probably most often, but this is all of the reactions as metabolism. So what reactions are keeping you alive? Now, metabolism, we do have a couple different classifications. If you are building something up, that is going to be called anabolism or synthesis. We have seen the word synthesis before with dehydration synthesis. We get rid of water to build something up, build up a polymer. I'm sure you have heard the word anabolism before with anabolic steroids. What do anabolic steroids do? They make someone very big. Catabolic is going to be the exact opposite. Catabolic is going to be breaking down. Decomposing is breaking down. Kind of another example. When you are building something up, remember when we talked about building bonds, you use energy. So it costs energy. It costs energy to build. Whereas whenever you are breaking down, you are releasing energy. So releasing energy to break. So going back to our cycle of ATP to ADP, or making protein, or building up polymers, building up carbohydrates, anything of that sort, we have used the terms hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is going to be an example of catabolism or decomposition. Whereas over here, anabolism and synthesis, remember, dehydration synthesis. Building up, breaking down, doing the exact opposite. Earlier, we simply talked about where's water. But now we're focusing on, does it cost energy or does it release energy? Other examples, in photosynthesis, you are building up sugar. Cellular respiration, you are breaking down. Processing sugar. So starting to become a little bit more frequent with our terminology. All we're doing is just adding a couple words to help with our understanding of what is happening. Because when we start to get into respiration and photosynthesis, they are opposites. One is building up, one is breaking down. The reactants of one are the products of another. So photosynthesis, we need water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight, and that's going to make, this is glucose, C6H12O2, and oxygen. So we are making that. Whereas respiration, we are starting with sugar. Every time you inhale, you are adding oxygen. And what that creates is energy, because you are breaking down sugar, which, remember, is catabolic as well as a decomposition. And when you break it down, we are making smaller things. So in addition to releasing energy, CO2 and H2O is what is happening. In chemistry, you're going to talk about decomposition essentially as a reaction anytime you have oxygen as a reactant. All right, final thing. Just kind of putting all of these words together. When we look at the ATP cycle, remember this is 3 phosphates, hence the T. The D is 2 phosphates. So what we are doing here, ATP to ADP, this is going to be ATP minus a phosphate is going to give us ADP plus energy. What this is telling us is energy is a product. We're becoming smaller. We are breaking down. Whenever we break down, this is going to be decomposition as well as catabolic. On the other end, we have ADP plus a phosphate plus energy, and this gives us ATP. Notice energy is a reactant. Energy is a requirement to make ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We are building up. Whenever you are building up, that is going to be synthesis. Synthesis means to build. And think about your anabolic steroids. Anabolic means building up. So the words associated, build, break. So a lot of vocab words to think about, but just starting to become a little bit familiar with ATP, how it's involved with respiration, photosynthesis, but more importantly, starting to understand how these cycles work and how they're complementary processes. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Please ask any questions if you are confused or need any additional assistance.